Good afternoon and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns short news for a Wednesday, April 24th, 2019. My name's Tom Luongo. We've got a lot to talk about today. I want to talk about Russia, North Korea, geopolitics. I want to get back into my bailiwick, right back into my, what you would call my comfort zone, as it were. I mean, all this Brexit stuff is fun, and, talking about about crazy Democrats is fun as well. But truth of the matter is that I get kind of twitchy if I don't talk about Russia for at least once a week. So happy hump day. Exactly, Pat. Happy hump day. So we're going to talk about what I think is going to happen at the summit in Vladivostok, to remind everybody that we do this every Monday night at 8 and Friday night at 8:30, and ad hoc during the week, here on both YouTube and DLive, which is a blockchain-based streaming service where you can earn crypto and donate directly to your content creators of choice, if that is your thing. I will leave a link in the description down below. So let us see what's going on here. It's amazing how every time I go live, somebody texts me. I never, by the way, this is just an aside, I never get texts at home. But the minute I go live, either my wife or my best friend and business partner always seem to text right as I go live. And it's always very distracting in the first minute or so. We're just trying to wait for a couple people to get into the stream, and then we're going to get started. So now that we're all here, now that we're all good to go, let's get into this. So this looks like a hastily put together summit between Kim Jong-un of North Korea and Vladimir Putin of Russia. But I'm not sure I buy that, right? This has been rumored now for close to 2 weeks. It is coinciding directly with the beginning of the Belt and Road Forum in Beijing. And I find the timing on this, well, there are no coincidences in geopolitics, so I find the timing on this to be quite important, as it were. I think Kim and Putin have had this in mind for close to a month. I know that the U.S. envoy to North Korea visited Moscow a week ago. We've heard nothing that came out of that meeting, by the way. That meeting happened about 6 days ago now, so let's put it at last Thursday or last Friday, and we've heard literally nothing in the news. But I'm going to go over all the things that I've seen in the last morning. I know that Stoyanovich says, yes, it was a busy news day. And it absolutely was a busy news day. So much so that as I was trying to write this article today, I kept getting emails from my Baker Street irregulars, as it were, constantly sending me, oh, by the way. And I'm like, and I'm having to edit this thing on the fly as I go and trying to edit my narrative on the fly, as it were. So I've got a blog post up over at tomluongo.me, my blog, where you can continue to follow my work on a regular basis if you so choose. So, all right, let's talk about this. So, no one is really giving this very high hopes for anything big is going to happen, right? Because it came together almost out of nowhere. The only official announcement of this only happened about 3 days ago. So, how momentous could this possibly be? Don't underestimate Putin. As a matter of fact, one of the things I say in the article that I just published, Putin has a tendency to radically hit the market, hit the geopolitics arena hard whenever they're not expecting it. Think about his intervention into Syria 2 days after his historic speech at the UN General Assembly. Think about last year's State of the Union address, where out of nowhere he announced all of these new missile systems and all these new weapon systems that even caught the United States intelligence services completely flat-footed. So don't think that there isn't a big announcement coming out of this, because I think that there is. I don't know what it's going to be. I mean, I have my guesses and whatnot, but everything now has changed with the Ukrainian elections. With Poroshenko now officially out, and who, by the way, was a U.S. asset for something like 13 or 14 years, well before he even became president. So the United States and the West have poured tremendous amount of money into Petro Poroshenko, and he's no longer in charge, at least for right now. Now, I'm sure that the Supreme Rada in Ukraine, which is mostly U.S. occupied territory, is not going to allow Zelensky to get away with much until the parliamentary elections, which are, by the way, in October. I thought they were earlier than that, but they're actually in October. So the next 4 or 5 months are going to be complete chaos with Ukraine. But Zelensky still has a lot of opportunity here to make some substantive inroads and to start building some trust with Putin while he tries to put together a party that can win a majority of the Ukrainian Rada, which would be the best situation for everybody. And yes, Poroshenko can do a lot of damage before he leaves. He's already had 3 major poison pills in the last year between the Russian Orthodox Church and the Ukrainian Patriarchy of move to try and split the Russian and Ukrainian Orthodox churches, the Kerch Strait incident, as well as canceling the Treaty of Friendship, and the continued shelling of the contact line LPR at the LPR and DPR, the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republic. So let's talk about what's actually happening here. Like I said, I don't know what is going to get announced by Putin and Kim after tomorrow's summit, but whatever it is, expected to be something significant. So the even if it's just an investment deal, maybe a nuclear power plant, maybe a railroad, maybe a pipeline, something from that's going to thoroughly flout UN sanctions that both Putin and Xi signed up for on the assurance by Trump that the U.S. would bargain in good faith to denuclearize the peninsula. And that has not happened. And you'll note that both Putin and Xi are incredibly angry with Trump and with the United States since the breakdown of talks in Hanoi. And those were scuttled by both John Bolton and Mike Pompeo for different reasons, but for ultimately to come down to that John Bolton never met an opportunity to fuck somebody over that he didn't take, and thinks that he's just going to squeeze everybody harder and is going to win by being a jackass and being being nothing more than an untrustworthy opponent, and thinks that he can just win through intimidation and win through belligerence. It's not going to happen. The way the Russians have acted in the last couple of weeks, it's very obvious that both Putin and Sergei Shoigu, his defense minister, along with Sergei Lavrov, his foreign minister, that they are done playing games with John Bolton. By upgrading the Russians upgrading their stance relative to the U.S. and now labeling the U.S. now an official threat, the Russians are now prepared for open war. Kim, Xi, and Putin, and to a lesser extent, Hassan Rouhani in Iran and Nasrallah in Lebanon are all very eminently practical people. These are not ideologues. These are people who will do exactly what is necessary in order to achieve what it is that they want to achieve. And they're not driven ideologically. Pompeo is driven with his dispensational, rapturous, good against evil fight that he firmly believes in. He and Mike Pence. And John Bolton is just as much of a freaking ideologue, except he believes in a manifest destiny of the United States to rule the world as a benevolent dictator. Don't kid yourself. That's what John Bolton thinks. He thinks that the United States is entitled to survive, and he will do everything that he thinks and he will justify any behavior, no matter how fucking crazy, including nuclear war, in order to assure U.S. supremacy. Here's the question now. Does he really have the stones to do it, and does Trump have the stones to do it? Alistair Crooke has a great article over Strategic Culture talking about the collision between the rational and the irrational, painting all of Trump's closest advisors as complete irrational dispensationalists, and Trump himself being an overly emotional and fatalistic commander-in-chief, believing at a certain level, having believed his entire adult life, really, that we were going to end in nuclear war, and that the human race is doomed. Jonathan, there's nothing closeted about John Bolton's Trotskyism. So that's where we are. Now, I think what's happening now is that Putin has finally, with Hanoi, I think both Putin and Xi have come to the conclusion that there's no negotiating anymore with the United States. If you look at every move that has been made in the last couple of months, they are all very proactive. I'm going to go over some of them right now. You have the news this morning that Putin just signed the order to fast-track handing out Russian passports. Russian passports. That means Russian dual citizenship for citizens of the Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republic in Ukraine. That is a blatant refutation of the entire Minsk Accords agreements and everything else. Something that was in place the entire time Poroshenko was in power. And that for a long time, I think Putin was holding on to Minsk 2 as a way to try and trying to keep the process from blowing up. But it's very obvious to him now that there is no turning back here. That the only thing John Bolton understands is strength. And either he's figured out that he's made his peace with being willing to go to, at a minimum, conventional warfare with the United States, if necessary, or that in order for him to get Bolton's attention, he has to do things that are now considered acts of war. And that means relative to Europe and the United States, by issuing Russian passports to the breakaway republics of Ukraine, Putin is now getting off of the schneid relative to trying to maintain any kind of trying to come up with any solution in Ukraine. He is now dictating to Zelensky, who I'm sure he considers very weak, saying, this is what we're doing. Then, and that's today. Now, last week, they cut off all oil. They put on an oil and coal export embargo to Ukraine, along with Belarus, which is where Ukraine gets most of its energy from. And the Ukrainian coal sector is imploding. It's looking a lot like the Venezuelan oil sector, except there ain't no sanctions stopping this. This is just pure and utter collapse of the Ukrainian economy. He sent military advisors into Venezuela. He's meeting with Kim. He sent two Su-160s last year armed with nuclear weapons over American airspace on their way to Venezuela to completely throw Bolton into a fucking tizzy fit. It was awesome. Unfortunately for the Venezuelans, it then accelerated our timetable for a regime change operation, but that was coming anyway. Jonathan, you need to sit down and read Mr. Crooke's article to understand what I mean by fatalistic. Trump expects the human race to be blown up in a nuclear war. He doesn't want to see it happen, but he expects it. So he's been talking about it for 35 years. It's not that he's willing to go along with it to get a desired goal. He's not. He just expects that it's going to become inevitable. And Pompeo and Bolton and Pence will maneuver him into that situation where he has no other choice, and he'll start lobbing nukes. That's what I think is going to happen. That's the argument that Crooke is putting together. It's the exact opposite of what you just said. Putin's not playing games now. Because remember, when you do all of this with respect to Ukraine, he is now thumbing his nose at Angela Merkel saying, get your shit together and get Nord Stream 2 finished and get it across the line. And get your people in and get your people in line. And get your people in line. Last week, some undersecretary of energy came out and said, oh, Nord Stream 2 is not going to happen for years. Yeah. And the Danes continue to say, oh, no, we want another plan for another route. Give us a third, because we're not going to give you your permit. That's all the United States putting pressure on the Danes in the back door. Merkel has got to get that shit under control, because Putin at this point is not playing games. He's thrown the Minsk Accords out the freaking window with this move this morning. He's willing to stop the border to close the border with Ukraine completely and send all of those refugees, because Ukraine is going to collapse completely and utterly. if Putin cuts off all the energy, and they're all going to go east, they're all going to go west into Europe. And there's going to be millions of Ukrainians looking for work this winter and looking for heat this winter if something doesn't get done. I'm telling you, Putin's not screwing around here. He's done playing games with Shinzo Abe over the Kuril Islands. He's like, shit'll get off the pot. We're not giving them back. If you want to have access to them, you can have access to them. We can sign a peace treaty. We cannot. Are you or are you not an independent country? It's the same thing with North Korea. It's what he's pulling. It's the same thing with Ukraine. It's the same thing with all of them. Are you people or are you not? Or are you not independent countries? If you're not independent countries, then fuck you. I don't want to deal with you anymore. The minute you want to be an independent country, I'll sit down and negotiate with you. He's done. Because he doesn't need to. Because he's cutting deals with everybody who wants to be something close to an independent actor. Egypt, Pakistan, India, Turkey. I mean, no one expected the United States to be happy about the Russians cleaving Turkey off from NATO. No one should expect the United States to be happy about that. But as I was talking to somebody behind the scenes in email over the last couple of days, Putin's cutting Ukraine loose. Eventually, Ukraine will have to come back to them because the Europeans don't want Ukraine. They only want Ukraine in order to try and push, in order to try and be price setters and force Russia to be a price taker on their own gas than a price setter on their own gas. And Putin's not playing that game. And now that that's not possible, Putin's throwing Ukraine to the wolves. It's the same thing that's happening in places like Georgia and others. And all of the former Soviet stands, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, all of them, they're all moving back into Russia's orbit. Because the United States can't compete with Russia in their own backyard. We were able to do so when Russia was weak in the 90s. We were able to make a lot of room. We were able to put a lot of things in place then. All of that infrastructure, all that time that was spent with the CIA and all the money that was spent, it wasn't changing anything. It was just buying off leadership. That leadership is all moving on. That leadership is either already dying or in the process of dying. Like when the leader of Uzbekistan died a few years ago, remember, Putin hadn't visited Uzbekistan in a decade, if ever. And he was in there the next day and he was at the funeral. And relationships between Uzbekistan and Russia have immediately improved from that moment and forward. Same thing with Azerbaijan. Same thing with Armenia, which was never really much of an issue. But even the color revolution, which brought Nikol Pashinyan into power in Armenia, hasn't turned out the way the United States and the West wanted it. Because Pashinyan immediately he realized very quickly that he wasn't going to be able to get any of the support that he thought he was going to get. And he immediately had to then start cutting deals with Putin again. So, when you start to really look at this and you look at how swiftly the Russian diplomatic corps has moved in the last few weeks since Hanoi, it's actually been quite stunning. Okay? It's actually been quite stunning. And I think that Putin is no longer going to be reactive from here on out. He's kind of allowed himself to be as reactive as possible and passive as possible for as long as possible. But I think that we're at a situation now with the moves that have been made in the last few weeks by the United States, by John Bolton, that have all put Bolton out over in the U.S. out over their skis. With Egypt telling Trump to go fuck himself over Arab NATO, the Kushner plan is now dead. Now they're taking the two-state solution off the table. It's a dead plan. It's never going to work. Lebanon has told and I've talked about this before. Lebanon has told Trump to go shit in the woods. Port deals and oil deals and everything else. It's all coming. And this rabid pro-Israeli policy that has been in place in the Trump administration is going to come back to bite not only the United States in the ass, but Israel as well in the long run. I was talking with Halsey about this last night, in between all the invective and the crazy. So, Trump came out the other day and said, isn't it a waste that we're all spending all this money on all these weapons? Yeah, well, Don, why don't you tell everybody, why don't you just, why don't you cut the Defense Department's budget? Oh, I can't politically. Yeah, it's a real shame, isn't it? What a tragedy. Let's go smoke some butts. I mean, give me a break, dude. You're the one pushing it. You're the one pushing the instability. You're the one thinking that chaos and crazy will get you a better deal at the table. These people are laughing at you. I mean, when Lebanon literally thumbs their nose at the United States, you got a problem. What? No big, beautiful weapons? He's such a jackass. Such a jackass. If the Democrats weren't a bunch of literal fucking losers, but whatever, they're off in intersectional la la land, and that's just not. And I don't think that's gonna change. The only thing I can think of at this point with the Democrats is they're trying really hard to out-left each other, to push Bernie Sanders into full-on commie mode in order for Biden to come in and look like the rational actor. But, what do you got? Creepy Joe versus Trump? Please. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. All right. That's pretty much what I've got this morning. I didn't really want to go on for a great period of time. I just mostly wanted to pop in, let you know that this is the situation. It's really, to me, in my mind, it seems really quite obvious that the game board has already changed. That even just Kim and Putin meeting, for all intents and purposes, changes the state of the game board. Because now Putin is willing to act and affect independently. And it'll be interesting to see what happens vis-a-vis UN sanctions going forward. And I firmly expect both the Russians and the Chinese to do everything they can to subvert them, or even just flat out ignore them and let the U.S. go crazy. Oh, you're blah, 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 blah. Whatever. You don't care about the UN anyway. You don't care about the UN anyway. You all want to leave it, so no one cares what you have to say anymore. That's what John Bolton sounds like at this point. That's what Trump sounds like. It's really sad. I'm sorry. Yeah, so there we are. All right, so that's what we got. We've got a dying empire and a bunch of crazies, and they have a whole bunch of nuclear weapons. Isn't that great? Happy Easter. All right, guys. If you like what you heard today, please give a like and subscribe down below. For those of you who are normal Brexiteers, and I'm hoping that I would actually do the Brexit thing. I'll probably do that on Thursday, tomorrow, maybe tomorrow or Friday. I'll do something along those lines. We'll talk about Brexit again just to see what's going on. So just to leave it off, Eric SFCA says, Pompeo said, "We will continue to fight these battles. It is a never-ending struggle until the rapture." Oh, I know. He's completely crazy. And Kim is like, I'm not dealing with some dispensationalist asshole. His rotundity only stops long enough to spout ridiculous dispensational shit on his way to raiding the buffet table. That's our foreign policy. When you realize that that's our foreign policy, you should be scared. That should scare you. Okay, I'm out. You guys take care. We'll do this again on Friday night, maybe Friday afternoon, 8:30. Be there, be square, be a trapezoid, be a rhombus, whatever. I don't care. All right. Talk to you soon. Keep your stick on the ice.